Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The Philadelphia Phillies offseason is heating up, and while fans are celebrating the Kyle Schwarber reunion, there's a dark cloud looming on the horizon that could completely derail this team's championship aspirations. Rumors are swirling that the Phillies are eyeing Colorado Rockies center fielder Brenton Doyle as their solution to the gaping hole in center field. And folks, we need to talk about why this would be an absolute disaster of epic proportions. This isn't just a questionable move. This could be the kind of decision that haunts the Phillies for years to come, the kind of transaction that makes you wonder what exactly is happening in the front office. Buckle up, because we're about to dive deep into why Brenton Doyle is not the answer, why the bullpen situation is spiraling out of control, and which National League teams should actually terrify Phillies fans as we march toward the 2026 season. Let's start with the elephant in the room, or should I say the center fielder in the trade rumors. Brenton Doyle's name keeps popping up in connection with the Phillies, and every time it does, a small part of my soul dies. Look, I get it. The Phillies are in a tough spot. They need a center fielder. Harrison Bader might sign elsewhere. Brandon Marsh playing center field every day is not exactly the championship formula you're looking for. The free agent market is thin. The trade market isn't much better. Beggars can't be choosers, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because even when you're desperate, even when options are limited, even when you're staring down the barrel of opening day without a clear answer in center field, trading for Brenton Doyle is not the solution. It's a band-aid on a bullet wound. It's rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's every cliché about making a bad situation worse, all rolled into one regrettable transaction. Now, before anyone accuses me of just bashing Brenton Doyle for no reason, let me be crystal clear about something. Brenton Doyle is a professional baseball player. He's made it to the major leagues, which is an incredible accomplishment that 99.9% of people who ever pick up a baseball will never achieve. He has legitimate skills. He's an outstanding defensive player, one of the best glove men in center field across all of baseball. He can absolutely fly around the bases, stealing bags and turning singles into doubles with his elite speed. At just 27 years old, he's entering what should be the prime years of his career. In the cavernous confines of Coors Field in Denver, playing defense in that massive outfield requires special athleticism, and Doyle has proven he can handle it. These are all genuine positives, legitimate reasons why a team might be interested in his services. But here's where we crash headfirst into reality, and it's not a gentle landing. Brenton Doyle cannot hit major league pitching consistently. We're not talking about a guy who's slightly below average at the plate. We're talking about a career 235 hitter who hit just 233 last season. He managed only 15 home runs despite playing half his games in one of the most hitter-friendly parks in baseball. And here's the kicker that should send chills down every Phillies fan's spine. His numbers away from Coors Field are dramatically, horrifically worse than his home numbers. When Doyle leaves the mile-high city of Denver and plays in normal atmospheric conditions, his bat essentially disappears. The difference between his home and road splits is stark enough that you have to question whether he can be an everyday player on a contending team. The splits against right-handed pitching are equally problematic. Doyle simply cannot hit righties consistently. He's not a switch hitter who can provide balance. He's not even a platoon player who can mash left-handed pitching to make up for his deficiencies. He's a right-handed hitter who struggles against pitchers throwing from the same side, which is already typically the tougher matchup for hitters. So what would the Phillies be getting if they traded for Brenton Doyle? They'd be acquiring a spectacular defensive center fielder who can run like the wind, but brings a bat that might charitably be described as a liability. And that's being generous. We're talking about a guy whose offensive contribution would be minimal at best, catastrophic at worst. The Phillies have spent years, literally years, trying to get their outfield offense to even reach league average. Look at the past 15 years of Philadelphia Phillies baseball, and you'll see a graveyard of outfielders who couldn't hit their way out of a paper bag. The franchise has cycled through so many mediocre bats in the outfield that it's become a running joke among fans. And now, when the team is supposedly in win-now mode, when they're trying to get over the hump and capture that elusive World Series championship, the solution is to go acquire another outfielder who can't hit. That doesn't compute. That's not progress. That's lateral movement at best, regression at worst. Think about what adding Brenton Doyle would mean for the Phillies lineup. You already have question marks. You have positions where the offense isn't exactly lighting the world on fire. Adding another automatic out, another easy target for opposing pitchers, another black hole in the batting order. That's not how championship teams are built. Championship teams maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. Trading for Doyle would be doing the exact opposite. It would be willingly, knowingly adding a weakness to the lineup and hoping that his defense somehow makes up for it. Spoiler alert, it won't. Defense is valuable, absolutely, but you can't win games if you can't score runs, and Doyle's bat doesn't help you score runs. Some analysts have compared Doyle to Johan Rojas in terms of what he'd bring to the Phillies. That comparison alone should tell you everything you need to know about why this is a terrible idea. Rojas hasn't proven he can be a regular major league player. He's had his moments, flashes of the potential that made him an exciting prospect, but he's also had brutal defensive lapses despite being touted as an elite glove man. He's made boneheaded base-running mistakes that have cost the Phillies games. He's simply not polished enough to play at the major league level every day, at least not yet. Now, to Doyle's credit, he is more polished than Rojas. He's proven he can play at the major league level consistently. But being better than Johan Rojas is an incredibly low bar to clear, and it's certainly not the standard the Philadelphia Phillies should be aiming for when they're trying to win a World Series. Can you honestly picture Brenton Doyle playing center field for a World Series champion? Close your eyes and imagine the Phillies hoisting the Commissioner's Trophy, and Doyle is your everyday center fielder. Does that image make sense? Does that lineup feel like a championship lineup? The answer, for any honest observer, has to be no. The Colorado Rockies, with all due respect to that franchise and their fans, are nowhere close to competing for anything meaningful. They're in full rebuild mode, stockpiling young talent and hoping to eventually contend down the line. Doyle is a piece on that roster, but he's not the reason they're losing. However, he's also not remotely close to being the caliber of player that a World Series contender should be targeting to fill a key position. And here's another critical factor that makes this potential move even more nonsensical. Brenton Doyle is not a free agent. The Phillies would have to trade for him. They'd have to give up assets, prospects, players from their organization to acquire a 27-year-old center fielder who can't hit. Now, it's probably not going to cost them Andrew Painter or Aiden Miller or Justin Crawford, their top three prospects who are essentially untouchable. But it's going to cost them something, even if it's a mid-level prospect or two, even if it's organizational depth. Why would you want to trade anything for Brenton Doyle? Why would you deplete your farm system, even marginally, for a player who doesn't move the needle offensively and whose defensive value, while real, isn't transformative enough to overcome his offensive deficiencies? The ideal profile for a Phillies center fielder isn't complicated or unreasonable. You want a plus defender. That's absolutely essential in the spacious confines of Citizens Bank Park. You want a right-handed bat to balance out a lineup that's historically been too left-handed heavy. And then you need one of two offensive profiles. Either you get a guy who can hit around 245 to 250 with 15 to 20 home run power, or you get a guy who can hit 280 to 290 with maybe 10 home runs but makes consistent contact and gets on base. Harrison Bader fits into that first profile. He's a legitimate defender, he's right-handed, and while his bat isn't spectacular, he provides enough offensive value to justify his presence in the lineup. Someone like Stephen Kwan, if the Phillies were interested in trading for him, would fit that second profile. Elite contact skills, high batting average, gets on base constantly, plays solid defense. Brenton Doyle fits neither profile. He doesn't hit enough for average, doesn't have enough power, doesn't get on base at an acceptable rate. He's a defensive specialist masquerading as an everyday player. The more you think about the Doyle rumors, the more they feel like an emergency move. The kind of desperation play you make in late February when pitchers and catchers are already in clear water and you still don't have a center fielder. But it's mid-December. We're not in emergency territory yet. There's still time for the market to develop, for other options to emerge, for creative solutions to present themselves. The Phillies shouldn't be panicking and settling for a suboptimal solution when there's still runway left in the off-season. If we get to spring training and the New York Mets are making moves and generating buzz, and the Phillies still haven't addressed center field, then fine. Maybe we have a different conversation about desperation moves. But we're nowhere near that point yet. The Phillies need to be honest about what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to win a World Series. That's the stated goal, the expectation from ownership, the mandate from a fan base that's been incredibly patient despite repeated postseason disappointments. You don't win a World Series by collecting guys who can field but can't hit. You don't win championships by settling for mediocrity in key positions because you're worried about missing out on someone. The urgency to fill center field is real, but the solution has to make baseball sense. And Brenton Doyle doesn't make baseball sense for this organization at this juncture. Now, these Doyle rumors are coming from legitimate MLB insiders, so this isn't just random speculation from some random person on Twitter. But here's the thing about off-season rumors. There's a lot of gamesmanship involved. Maybe the Rockies are trying to drum up interest in Doyle. They leak to a reporter that the Phillies have called about him or talked to them at the winter meetings, and suddenly other teams think, well, if the Phillies like him, maybe we should take a look. It's a way to generate a market for a player who might not otherwise have much of a market. There's subterfuge everywhere in baseball during the off-season. Not every rumor is real. Not every reported interest is genuine. Teams use the media to create leverage, to build buzz, to manipulate the market. So it's entirely possible that the Doyle to Phillies connection is more smoke than fire. But even if it's just smoke, the fact that Dave Dombrowski's name is anywhere near this conversation is concerning. Look at Dombrowski's track record with outfield acquisitions. It's been, to put it charitably, mixed. Harrison Bader has been the clear success story, a deadline trade that worked out beautifully and gave the Phillies exactly what they needed in center field. But beyond Bader, the history is spotty. So when fans hear that Dombrowski might be targeting Brenton Doyle, there's understandable anxiety. Is this another questionable outfield move in the making? Is this going to be another head-scratcher that leaves everyone wondering what the front office is thinking? Let's shift gears and talk about another massive problem that's developing for the Phillies. The bullpen situation is spiraling out of control, and the team is watching helplessly as quality relievers fly off the board to other teams. Tyler Rogers, who would have been an absolute perfect fit for this Phillies bullpen, signed with the Toronto Blue Jays on a 3-year, $37 million deal. For those keeping track at home, that's roughly $12 million per year for a high-leverage right-handed reliever who the Phillies have been completely unable to hit throughout his career. This is the kind of guy who makes a real difference in close games, who can get outs in the 7th and 8th innings, who can be trusted in big moments. And he's gone, off to Toronto. The Phillies didn't get him. The Rogers signing is emblematic of a larger issue the Phillies are facing this offseason. They're moving slowly on roster construction while other teams are aggressively addressing their needs. Kyle Schwarber is back. Fantastic. That's a huge win for the organization. But while they're focused on bringing back Schwarber and negotiating with JT Realmuto for his return behind the plate, the rest of the market is moving. Edwin Diaz went to the Dodgers. Robert Suarez signed with the Braves. Tyler Rogers is now in Toronto. Kenley Jansen joined the Detroit Tigers. These are impact relievers, guys who can change the complexion of a bullpen, and they're all gone. The relief market is getting picked clean, and the Phillies are still sitting on their hands waiting for the Realmuto situation to resolve. Now, to be fair, catcher is more important than a right-handed reliever. Getting Realmuto locked up on a new deal is absolutely a priority, and it makes sense that the Phillies are focused on that before aggressively pursuing bullpen help. But at some point, you're going to run out of quality options. At some point, you're going to look around and realize that all the good relievers are gone, and you're stuck shopping at the bargain bin, hoping to find a diamond in the rough. And we all remember how well that worked out last time the Phillies tried to get creative with bargain bin relievers. Jordan Romano and Joe Ross were both disasters, complete busts who provided no value and hurt the team more than they helped. That's what happens when you wait too long and settle for inferior options, because the good players are already off the market. The Phillies desperately need a high-leverage right-handed reliever. They have Orion Kerkering, but relying heavily on him after his injury issues last season feels risky. They have Jose Alvarado and Matt Strahm from the left side, which is fine, but you need balance. You need someone who can come in and get big outs against right-handed hitters in crucial situations. Tyler Rogers was that guy. He was the perfect fit. And the contract isn't even that onerous. 3 years, $37 million is manageable for a player of his caliber. The Phillies could have afforded that, even with the Schwarber deal already on the books. The issue is that the Phillies seem to be operating on a sequential timeline. First Schwarber, then Realmuto, then we'll worry about everything else. But baseball doesn't work that way. The market doesn't wait for you to complete your checklist in order. Players sign when the money and fit are right, regardless of where other teams are in their off-season plans. So while the Phillies methodically work through their priorities, other teams are being opportunistic, jumping on good players when they become available. It's frustrating to watch, especially knowing that the bullpen was already a weakness and is now getting even thinner as quality options disappear. Once Realmuto is locked up, assuming that happens soon, the Phillies will need to pivot immediately to bullpen help. But by that point, what's going to be available? The pickings are already slim. The best arms are gone. You're going to be choosing from the second and third tier of free agent relievers, hoping one of them can step up and provide the kind of value that Tyler Rogers or Robert Suarez would have provided. It's not an ideal situation, and it's largely a product of the Phillies' slow-moving approach to roster construction. There's also the financial reality that the Phillies might need to clear some payroll space before they can aggressively pursue bullpen help. If they want to spend $37 million over 3 years on a reliever, they're going to need to create some room under the luxury tax threshold or wherever their internal budget ceiling is. That likely means moving Nick Castellanos, or maybe Alec Bohm, or Brandon Marsh, or Bryson Stott. None of those guys are on massive contracts, but moving one or two of them would create the financial flexibility needed to make another significant addition. But those trades take time to develop, time to find the right partner, time to negotiate and finalize. And while the Phillies are working through that process, more relievers are signing elsewhere. The reality is that the Phillies are behind the 8 ball when it comes to the bullpen, and it's a direct result of their prioritization of other areas. Again, Schwarber is more valuable than any reliever. Realmuto is more valuable than any reliever. But that doesn't make it any less frustrating to watch quality arms sign with other teams while the Phillies sit idle. The hot stove is absolutely blazing right now. This is as active as the off-season market gets. And if you're late to dinner, you're going to be stuck with cold leftovers. The Phillies are dangerously close to being in that position. The silver lining, if there is one, is that JT Realmuto's situation should resolve soon. He's not going to drag this out all winter. He wants to know where he's playing, wants to get settled, wants to start preparing for the season. All indications are that he'll be signed by the end of the month, possibly by the end of next week. Once that happens, the Phillies can turn their full attention to the bullpen and hopefully salvage something from what's left of the free agent market. But they better move fast, because every day that passes, another quality reliever comes off the board. One move the Phillies have made is signing Bryce Wilson, a reliever from the White Sox. And almost immediately fans were asking, why? Why this guy? Wilson spells his first name in a truly bizarre way, Bryce, which is not how you typically see that name spelled. But more importantly, his track record doesn't inspire confidence. He's not a guy you're bringing in to be a high-leverage arm. He's not an impact addition. He's organizational depth at best, a guy who might get a cup of coffee in the majors but isn't moving the needle for a championship contender. So when people counter the concerns about the Phillies' bullpen by saying, well, they did sign a reliever, the response has to be, did they though? Bryce Wilson isn't the answer. He's not a player who's going to help the Phillies go from a first-round exit to World Series champions. The frustration in the fan base is palpable right now, and it's not hard to understand why. Other than bringing back Schwarber, what impact moves have the Phillies made? What additions have they made that genuinely move the needle? It feels like a lot of sitting around, waiting, watching other teams improve while the Phillies remain static. That's not a recipe for success in a competitive division and a loaded National League. Speaking of that loaded National League, let's talk about who the Phillies should actually be worried about as competition. A recent poll asked Phillies fans which team, outside of the Dodgers, poses the biggest threat in the National League. The options were the Mets, Braves, Brewers, and Padres. And the results are fascinating, though definitely influenced by recent news and recency bias. Only 7% of respondents picked the New York Mets as the biggest threat. That feels disrespectfully low, even for a team that Phillies fans rightfully despise. Yes, the Mets lost Pete Alonso. Yes, they lost Edwin Diaz. But they still have Juan Soto, who just signed a massive contract and is one of the premier hitters in baseball. They still have Francisco Lindor, an elite shortstop who can impact the game on both sides of the ball. They added Marcus Semien to bolster their infield. Their rotation, while inconsistent, has the talent to be very good when healthy. And let's not forget that the Phillies have historically struggled mightily when playing at Citi Field. The Mets might not be the prohibitive favorites in the division, but dismissing them as only a 7% threat seems like a mistake born from watching them lose a couple of key players. The San Diego Padres came in third at 18%, and honestly, that feels about right. The Padres have this weird energy about them where they're talented enough to be dangerous, but never quite seem to put it all together. Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis Jr. are stars, no question. They have pieces that could theoretically make a deep playoff run. But there's something missing, some intangible element that separates contenders from pretenders. They feel like a team that will win 85 to 90 games, make some noise, maybe win a playoff series, but ultimately fall short of the ultimate goal. The Padres have big-time loser energy, and until they prove otherwise, it's hard to take them too seriously as a genuine World Series threat. The Milwaukee Brewers finished second in the poll at 29%, which might actually be underselling them. Remember, the Brewers had the best record in baseball during the regular season. They're consistently competitive, consistently well-managed, consistently getting more out of their roster than you'd expect based on payroll and star power. They develop pitching better than almost anyone. They play fundamentally sound baseball. They're never an easy out. The Brewers deserve more respect than they typically get, and while they might not have the star power of some other contenders, they're always dangerous. But the runaway winner of the poll, coming in at 46%, nearly half of all respondents, was the Atlanta Braves. And this feels like the definition of recency bias, though it's not necessarily wrong. The Braves just made some significant moves, adding to their bullpen and reminding everyone that when healthy, they have one of the most talented rosters in baseball. Ronald Acuna Jr., when he's on the field, is a transcendent talent. Matt Olson is one of the premier power hitters in the game. Michael Harris is an excellent young center fielder. Ozzie Albies is a dynamic second baseman. Their rotation, when healthy, features quality arms throughout. The Braves are absolutely a legitimate threat, no question about it. But the reason this feels like recency bias is because just a couple of months ago, everyone was focused on the Mets as the Phillies' primary competition. The Mets made that magical run to the playoffs. They were the talk of baseball, and everyone was worried about them dominating the division moving forward. Now the Braves make a couple of moves and suddenly they're back to being the primary threat. Both teams are dangerous. Both teams have the talent to compete for division titles and playoff spots. The constant flip-flopping between which team is scarier feels more about reacting to recent news cycles than accurately assessing the competitive landscape. If we're being honest, the most fairly rated team in that poll is probably the Padres at 18%. They're good enough to beat you on any given day, talented enough to be in the playoff mix, but flawed enough that they don't keep you up at night. The Mets should be higher than 7%. They're too talented and too well-funded to dismiss that thoroughly. The Brewers at 29% feels about right, maybe even a touch low given their track record. And the Braves at 46% is probably a bit inflated by recent transactions, though they're certainly a major threat. The bigger picture here is that the National League is stacked with quality teams. The Phillies don't get the luxury of sleepwalking to a division title. They're going to have to earn every win, fight for every game, and outperform talented competition just to make the playoffs, let alone make a deep run. That's why the offseason moves matter so much. That's why settling for Brenton Doyle in center field would be so damaging. That's why missing out on bullpen arms like Tyler Rogers hurts. The margin for error is razor thin when you're competing against the Mets, Braves, Brewers, Padres, and of course the juggernaut Dodgers who are coming off back-to-back World Series championships.